It was the year 2030, and humanity's ambitions to explore the cosmos had reached an unprecedented height. NASA's Mars mission was prepared to send a lone astronaut on the first solo journey from Earth to Mars. It was a monumental occasion, an achievement that would undoubtedly reshape the course of human history. Captain Ethan Cole, a seasoned astronaut, had been selected for the mission. He had spent countless hours in isolation training, preparing for the loneliness that would inevitably accompany the 6-month voyage to the Red Planet. As the spaceship ascended, the familiar sight of Earth faded into a sea of stars. The prospect of being so far from home, from everything he had ever known, began to gnaw at Ethan. He had braced himself for the solitude, but no amount of training could prepare him for the vast expanse of nothingness that surrounded him. Days turned into weeks. Ethan's only human contact was with Mission Control, but even their voices started to sound distant and distorted. The familiar routines that once grounded him began to blur together in a hazy, monotonous rhythm. He started to lose track of time as the days bled together, each one indistinguishable from the last. As the weeks wore on, Ethan's sanity began to unravel. His dreams became haunted by strange, unnerving visions that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. He would often awaken in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, unable to discern whether the horrors he had just experienced were real or imagined. One day, Ethan stumbled across an old tattered journal hidden away in a crevice of the ship. It belonged to a long-forgotten astronaut who had embarked on a similar journey decades ago, only to disappear without a trace. Intrigued, Ethan began reading the journal, hoping to find solace in the words of someone who had faced the same loneliness he now endured. As he read, Ethan became captivated by the astronaut's tale, his descent into madness mirroring Ethan's own. The journal's pages were filled with frantic scribbles and haunting illustrations, each entry more disturbing than the last. The astronaut had slowly lost his grip on reality, plagued by hallucinations and paranoia that eventually consumed him entirely. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was following in this lost astronaut's footsteps, his own sanity slipping away like sand through his fingers. The more he read, the more he began to question his own perceptions, his mind playing tricks on him as the line between reality and nightmare blurred further. One day, as Ethan floated through the narrow corridors of the ship, he caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye. It was a figure, lurking in the shadows, its presence seeming to flicker in and out of existence. He tried to convince himself that it was just a figment of his imagination, a symptom of his unravelling sanity, but the figure continued to haunt him, appearing when he least expected it, always lurking just out of reach. Unable to shake the sensation that he was being watched, Ethan began to obsess over the figure, searching the ship for any sign of its presence. He became consumed with paranoia, convinced that the figure was trying to sabotage his mission, to drive him mad as it had the lost astronaut before him. Ethan's days turned into a feverish hunt for the elusive figure, his once rational mind now a whirlwind of fear and paranoia. He found himself talking to the walls, pleading with the unseen figure to reveal itself, to end the torment that had come to define his existence. Mission Control, growing increasingly concerned for Ethan's mental state, tried to intervene, urging him to abandon his search and focus on the mission at hand. But their voices now seemed like distant echoes, meaningless noise that could not penetrate the veil of madness that had descended upon him. As Ethan's obsession with the figure grew, his health began to deteriorate. His once strong frame grew gaunt and skeletal, his eyes sunken and hollow. He barely ate or slept, consumed entirely by his desperate search for the phantom that haunted his every waking moment. The months passed, and the Red Planet loomed ever closer. Ethan's once precise calculations now seemed hopelessly tangled, a mess of numbers and symbols that swam before his eyes. His once pristine spaceship had become a cluttered maze of debris, a reflection of the chaos that had taken hold of his mind. One day, as the ship hurtled through the void toward its final destination, Ethan finally came face to face with the figure that had tormented him for so long. It stood before him, a hulking, shadowy mass, its form constantly shifting and changing as if trying to escape his gaze. Its very presence seemed to drain the air from the room, leaving Ethan gasping for breath. In that moment, as he stared into the abyss, something within Ethan snapped. He lunged at the figure, a primal scream tearing from his throat, as he grappled with the phantom that had haunted him for so long. The two figures wrestled in the weightless environment, the ship's alarms blaring in the background as it hurtled toward the Martian surface. As Ethan and the figure struggled, they crashed into the ship's control panel, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The ship began to veer wildly off course, the alarms growing louder and more frantic as the Martian surface loomed ever closer. With a final surge of strength, Ethan hurled the figure away from him, watching in horror as it disintegrated before his eyes. He realized too late that the figure had never been real. It was a manifestation of his own madness, a symbol of the darkness that had consumed him during his lonely voyage through the void. As the ship plummeted toward Mars, Ethan stared out the window at the red planet, his eyes filled with regret and despair. He had come so far, only to be consumed by the very darkness he had sought to escape. And now, as the ship hurtled toward its final fiery descent, Ethan could only hope that his story would serve as a warning to those who dared to follow in his footsteps. The abyss of space was vast and unforgiving, and it demanded a sacrifice from those who dared to venture into its depths.